You want to make sure that that's not touching, so it prevents your teeth from touching. So what we want to do is just pull that pin up ever so slightly so that we can just get an Explorer or a piece of paper in between there, and then lock that down so we don't lose a lot of vertical dimension. There are several ways to tell if you've got good centric stops established and that they're on nice flat areas. One of the ways is to tell by the sound. This setup is just my preliminary setup, and it doesn't have good contacts. Listen to the sound that we have here. Here's a fully processed case where we've adjusted the contacts, and notice the difference in the sound here. In that last demonstration, you could hear that I didn't have a good solid knocking or rapping sound. It should sound like a woodpecker knocking on a tree. That's usually caused by contacts that are on inclines. Let's take a look at the contacts I have in this wax-up. This is a great contact. It's right in the middle of the marginal ridge. On this tooth, however, if you take a look really carefully, you notice that this contact right here is on an incline, and also over here. It's these contacts on inclines that prevents you developing that good solid knocking sound that you heard in the last clip. If we take a look at the rest of this, you'll notice that we have absolutely no contacts on our first premolar over here, no contacts on this first premolar over here. This contact is very close to where we want it. Here's where it should be, right in the middle of the marginal ridge, so it's up on an incline as well. And if you take a look at this one over here, on these anatoline teeth, it's also a bit on the incline. So we've really got only contacts on 4 of our molar teeth. And so we want to establish these contacts on the premolars, and we also want to move contacts down till they're right on a flat area. We get that good solid wrapping. In the corresponding wax up in the maxilla, you can see we've got a good contact here. It's probably a little bit on the incline. The cusp tip is up here. We could move that up there, so we'll adjust this. We'll lighten this up here, and it will move the contact to our cusp tip. This is exactly where we want to be on this molar. This molar here needs to establish a few heavier contacts. On the opposite side, we've got a little bit of a rotated premolar, and that's probably why we're not getting the contacts that we want there. We'll probably adjust that by softening the wax and derotating the tooth. Over here we've got a good contact on the tip of the cusp, another good one on the tip of the cusp, but this one's on an incline. We want to eliminate that one. Cusp tip here is over on the top here. We've also got one on the incline. So the first thing that we're going to do is just to check and see how far away some of our teeth that are not in contact are. If they're a long ways away from contact, there's no sense adjusting and adjusting and adjusting till they come into contact. We'll move those in the wax. We're looking from the lingual tongue space now, and as I move this up and down, you may be able to see that the premolar is a little ways away from touching. That also happens to be the premolar that was rotated. So we'll heat that tooth up, we'll derotate it, and we'll move it down a little further so that we hope to establish some contact. Remember, it's always easier to adjust a tooth by grinding it a little bit. We'd rather not reset teeth. But if you do have to move a tooth or grind a tooth a lot to get it in the position you want, it's often easier to move it in the wax. When you do that, make sure that you make the wax around the tooth molten, or you'll struggle trying to get it in the proper position. Most students don't heat up the wax warm enough, they don't get it molten, and it's really difficult to move. I've derotated my tooth, and I've also pulled it so it's a little bit longer than what it should be. Now I'm going to put it back on my articulator, and with it being a little bit longer, I'm going to make sure that it indeed is touching when I close the articulator. And I'll close that down till it touches, and I'll also try and make sure that I don't have contact with any buccal cusps. I do right here, so I'm going to change that inclination a little bit more. So I'll just rotate that a little bit, and now I've got the space that I want between my buccal cusps. I'll mark my centric stops, and you can see now that I've picked up a centric stop here, and if we look on the maxillary arch, you can see that I'm starting to pick up contacts. Again, a little bit on the inclines on either side of the cusp. I can adjust those very easily. Let's start adjusting these contacts. We'll always start in the mandible, and we'll start by deepening fosses to get contacts off of inclines. When we look at this contact here, it's right where I want to be. It's right in the middle of the marginal ridge. This one, however, is on an incline. I'm going to remove that one. This one's also close to where I want, but it's on an incline. I'm going to remove that lightly. This one is close. I'm going to take the buckle portion off and keep it right where it is. On the opposite side, I've got a contact over here, which is close to where the fossa should, to the middle of the marginal ridge, but it's on an incline, so I'm going to reduce that one. This one's also on an incline. I'll reduce that. It might look like I've wiped out all of my contacts right now, but contacts on inclines are not what I want. If you see one on an incline, eliminate it. If you find that your teeth now are too far away from touching, it's time to move them in the wax. But normally you'll find as you adjust things that the contacts will move around, and with just a little bit more extra reduction on cusps that are heavy or cusps that are contacts on inclines, you'll be able to adjust the occlusion just the way you want. Normally when you're marking your centric contacts, you should use paper on both sides of the arch. You should tap the articulator and mark both sides at the same time. That way you won't deal with the problem of marking one side with a different strength of tap than you mark on the other side. In that case, the marks that you see may differ only because of how hard you tap the articulator together. So I've marked both sides with articulating paper. You can hear that it's still not a good hard wrapping sound, still a little bit dull. I'm expecting to see more contacts on inclines. I'm seeing two things now when I look at this mandibular denture. I'm seeing some contacts that are in the right position, but I'm also seeing that the contacts over on this side are quite a bit heavier than those that I see on this side. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten up the centric contacts even though they might be where I want, and those on inclines, I'm going to remove those. On the opposite side, if I've got contacts on inclines, I'm going to lighten them up. If I've got contacts that are in the right position, such as this light one over here, I'm going to leave those alone. Normally we'll adjust in the mandible first, and we'll try to avoid altering the cusps that are going to be our centric stops in the maxilla. But if you've got some really heavy contacts on one side that are quite different than the other side, sometimes I'll adjust those too. And what I'm going to do is any contact on the incline I'm going to remove. I'm going to try and keep it right at the cusp tip. I've got one on an incline here in the middle. I'm going to remove that. This one's a bit heavy, so I'll lighten it up on the side of the cusp there so that I keep it right on the cusp tip. Over here you can see this is what we would call a target type of contact. It's sort of got an empty spot in the middle and it's followed by a dark ring around it. Those are usually very heavy contacts. I'm going to lighten that one up and take the part that's on the incline and remove it, leaving the part that's on the cusp tip. This one over here is very light. It's on the incline. I'm going to remove it. This one over here is okay up here, but on the side over here, you can see that I'm on the incline. And I'm going to remove that incline as well. Right now I'm in the preliminary stages and I've got some really heavy contacts. That's why I'm doing both the maxilla and the mandible at the same time. When you're marking your contacts, make sure that the articulating paper covers your mandibular incisors. If you have centric contacts in the anterior teeth in centric position, you want to eliminate those. I could tell the last time that I tapped that things were getting a little bit better. And you can see here that my contact strength is getting better. You can see over on this side I'm mostly where I want. I've got a little bit on an incline over here. I'm going to remove that. But my other contacts are looking pretty good. On this side over here, I've got a slight contact up here on the incline that I'll remove. These two contacts are on flat areas. I'll keep those. This one's on an incline. I'm getting rid of that. This one's a bit on the incline here. Don't know if you can see as you look from the side. We're going to remove that and just keep the very bottom part of the contact. This one's a little bit heavy. It's right where we want it. We'll lighten that one up. When I'm looking in the maxilla, this looks good. This looks pretty good. This one I've got contacts on either side of the cusp on the incline. I'm going to remove those. Over on the other side, this is looking pretty good. Great cusp tip, great cusp tip. Here I'm sort of got one on either side, so I'm going to lighten that up and move it toward the tip. This one over here is a little bit light. I'm going to take off the part that's on the incline on the side of the tooth. We've only been adjusting these teeth for a few minutes, but already you can start to hear a difference in the sound of the articulation. Contacts are starting to get better. I don't want a buccal contact up here. Anything on inclines, I'm removing. Keeping those ones on the marginal ridge. Anything else on an incline is coming off. Anything on a buccal cusp is coming off. You can see over here, my contacts are starting to even with what we have over here. We don't have to have contacts all along the teeth. It's sufficient to have one contact per tooth if you want, but you should have contacts on each tooth throughout the arch. So I'm getting very, very close with what you see here. I've got a single centric contact on every tooth. I'd sort of like to get one in between here somewhere. I might have to deepen the rest of my contacts to do that. On this side over here, great contact, really good contact. Remember, we're not going to gain any contacts here. This is where the maxillary canine comes down. There's no opposing maxillary cusp in this area. Looking in the maxilla, this is a little bit heavy on this contact here. If you look from the side, you can see that part of that's on an incline, so I'm going to remove the part on the incline and just keep the part up toward the cusp tip. This is a good contact. This is a good contact. Get rid of any of those contacts on the incline. Looking at the other side, good contact. Get rid of the external incline there. Here's a good contact. This part's on the incline. I'm going to remove that one. I'm going to remove this one over here on the palatal surface. And this one's just about coming, but not quite. Needs to be a little bit heavier. When you clean off the markings that you have on your articulator, use a clean piece of gauze and just rub really firmly. That's the cleanest way to get the markings off. Don't use water on your gauze, and don't use a toothbrush. If you use water, you're going to smear the markings. If you use a toothbrush, you're going to get some of the black markings from the articulating paper into the wax. It won't look very good. Once you've used your articulating paper for a while, it's going to get worn out. Don't use it more than 3 or 4 times. If it starts to look moth-eaten like this, it's not going to mark where you're getting your contacts. We've just been adjusting for a little while, but already you can hear the difference in the sound from the tapping that I make when I'm using my articulator. Here's my mandibular contacts, and you can see they're pretty good. I could probably establish one more on this molar here. It's a little bit light, but overall those are nice and even. They're centered where I want. In the maxillary arch, they should look like they're on the cusp tips, and again, those are looking pretty even. I might just adjust over here where I've got some contacts on the inclines. When I look at my maxillary contacts, they're even and they're right on the cusp tips. That's what I want. We're ready to move on to our eccentric